All right, welcome everybody. I'm really happy to be here, and I just got really nervous. I'm a goalkeeper, so apparently I'm supposed to be good under pressure. So let's see if I can pull this off. I really am excited because there's so many people. I mean, I've literally lived my passion, and not many people have the luxury of doing that. And the reason I've done it is because I got a pair of soccer cleats, and I showed up at soccer practice, and I started playing for the Bionic Booters. And then it turned into Sweeney's Meanies, and some of those players are in this room. And so we are all not 6 degrees from separation. We are all in this room about 1.25 degrees from separation. And I can't wait to celebrate the history that is women's soccer and soccer in general in the state of Washington with the people that are in this room. All of you have a story to share from a friend that you know, or a game that you had at Memorial Stadium, or God knows where, a game that you watch. We're all a part of it. So I want to thank the sponsors for sure, Kaizen Financial. Lori, thank you so much. I am not used to thanking. I have to look at this paper because I'm not used to thanking sponsors because we've never had them. We've always paid to play, so I'm like, what are we thanking them for? They did what? So, and honestly, I have a nice little savings thanks to Lori, so I'm going to be needing that very, very soon. If you need one, you go to her. There's nobody better, honestly. I want to thank Brunner Orthodontics, Crossfire Premier, and also the Rain Academy for helping put this together. It's the only time Crossfire Premier and Rain Academy will probably be mentioned in the same sentence, but it shouldn't be that way. We're all in this together, and all of us keep bumping into one another. And you guys are all in this room because you're awesome citizens of the sport, and you know that. You know that. I mean, I think if I was a real a-hole, we wouldn't be so excited to see anybody, and Anson wouldn't have shown up to help us out. So thank gosh I was on my best behavior, and all of us are kind of, like I said, we're all in this together. Our caterer is a Yummy Tummy Thai, so snaps for them for the awesome food. I see a lot of looky-loos walking by, and they're smelling everything and coming in. We're like, no, you don't know how to kick a ball. Get the hell out of here. What else? I think that's good for the thank yous for now, and of course the Sounders who let us have this beautiful place. And honestly, my soccer passion probably started back in the NASL days, and I still have a soccer ball signed. If I sold the most raffle tickets, I got to come to a game for free, and I got a signed ball, and I still have that signed ball. And so many of those players helped grow our sport, and their kids play, and they ended up coaching in our state. So the Sounders has such a rich tradition, and how cool is it to go to the game and do the boom boom clap for them. So thanks so much for the 90. Now it's my sincere pleasure to introduce Debbie Barlow, who is a member of Washington Legends, and she's going to tell you a little bit of what it's about. And I met Debbie, I was like, I don't know. I'm supposed to introduce you, and I do not know when it was. How embarrassing is that? But what I do remember is she coached me on the state team. I have no idea what year, and I was younger than a couple of the other young ladies on the team. And I remember her just looking at me, and I was still in this, like, kind of this used to be oversized. I was in the oversized men's jersey. And I was late, and I was overwhelmed, and my parents had to drive me a long, long way, and she just looked at me and said, I got you, right? Well, lo and behold, some 40 years later, I said, I'm sorry, I'm running late, I forgot the tickets to the game, and we're just grabbing the keg. And you know what her text was? I got you. So that's who Debbie's been in my life, and I'm happy to introduce her.
So I want to tell you who the Washington Legends of Soccer are, because that's the organization that you've been wondering what masterminds put this thing together for tonight. And it was that organization, which is a nonprofit organization with a very eclectic, diverse board of strange talents who have talents in a lot of different areas. Our mission is to celebrate, to preserve, and to inspire. we have an incredible history in Washington, and we don't want to lose track of it. We want to make sure that we hang on to that and celebrate it and pass that legacy on forward to the next generation. We celebrate with events like this. We had a night with Alan Hinton. Wave at us, Alan. Beautiful, beautiful, fun event celebrating Alan and hearing all the true stories about his coaching. We did a night with Brian Schmetzer, This Is Your Life, and then this kind of event. So we do those kinds of things. We also have, in terms of preserving our history, Frank has been working tirelessly on our website, which you could go into, Washington State Legends of Soccer. He's attempting to fill every year from 1890 to the present with what the key events of soccer were in those years. So check it out online. If you have pictures that will help us fill in the gaps or documents, get them to us. So preserve and celebrate. The third one is inspire, and we were able this year to offer 2 scholarships out of Washington Legends of Soccer for $5,000 each to 2 really deserving kids from Everett who are going to play soccer and attend Everett Community College. So awesome stuff coming out of our group. So your last question is, how do I stay in touch with this group? Get connected with us on Facebook and check out our website. We're present in both locations. The Facebook pages always have our events so that you can be notified when the next one is. This has been such a fun and successful event. We're going to put another women's event on after the first of the year. We hope we can get Michelle Akers to come up for that one if we plan it at exactly the right time of year so that she can be here also. It'd be really fun to see her and celebrate the '99 World Cup team. We've had a lot of Washington women on all of those great teams of the past. So I hope we see you again at the next event that we host. We host some for men too. You might want to go to those. Thank you.
I just handed the mic. Leslie's like, you're supposed to introduce me. Like, cool. So I'm here to introduce our moderator. I've known Leslie forever, and I was thinking when I was driving here, well, the laundry list of her accolades is forever, but she was on the coolest ones that people would think and forget her. She's on the all-century Pac-12 team. So starting, right, which is all-century, which means she's really old. By far. So Leslie's in the starting back line, and then it's like almost 2 decades before you start seeing a Hope Solo and a Alex Morgan, and it's crazy that that's how much she's led the way, both as a player. She's responsible for turning Cal women's soccer from a club sport to varsity sport. She did it were you a freshman at the time? As a freshman, the AD said, if you want this to happen, you're going to have to fire the current coach. So as a freshman, they said, kind of like you just did to me, handed off the mic. And so as a freshman, she walked in there, and that's kind of, I think, what a lot of people in this room have done to keep the sport and make sure it's grown is they found a way to make it happen so that we get what we deserve. Okay, and so Leslie's done that. She's been at University of Washington. Her biggest claim to fame is the best player that never played on the national team. Leslie was on the B team forever, and the B team was awesome, and that's what really sucked about it. No, awesome. It's what really sucked about not having enough opportunity and not having enough ways for players to develop and compete against each other. It just wasn't around. So I forget about that. She's the one that reminds me all the time, because for us, a lot of the people, we were all in this together, and some of us just got luckier than others, I think. So that's Leslie. But I have to say the most important thing probably in my life was she's the one, when I graduated from college, that said, why don't you get into coaching? And I said, no, I've got all my hours. I'm going to be a physical therapist. And then that very same day, a football player came up on the table, and he hopped on the table, and he said, hey, Jamie. And I said, well, what? Even though my name is Amy. And he said, I got this zit on the back of my helmet, and it's rubbing against my helmet. I was wondering if you could pop it for me. And I'm like, ah. And then another, Sherrod got on the table, and I said, Sherrod, what ankle do you get taped when you're up here? And he said, shoot. My sandwich hand is my right hand, and my milk hand is my left hand. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to move on to soccer. So I actually have Lesle to thank for a life of passion and the best friendship anyone could offer, and really that's what life is about. It has nothing to do with X's and O's. So here's Lesle Gallimore.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you never follow Amy. Ever. And on the sheet that, Frank put together a lot of notes for us in the program this evening, and my job is to moderate and introduce our distinguished panel. The first thing on here was Amy, introduce yourself, which she didn't really do, but she's one of the panelists, so I'm going to save her for last. But I've had a lot of questions, and again, I wore this jacket. It's a California Tremors amateur jacket, and we won a lot of amateur national championships in California. Yeah. I've lived in Washington now for 26 years, and I wore it just for that response, and I'm so happy I got it. Yeah. I knew it would irk them beyond belief, so yay me. And it is really, when I saw it in my closet, I go, that's what I'm wearing. And I will say that Jan Smisek and I both are South Bay, Southern Californians who have both become Washingtonians through and through, and for good reason. It's this room. I guarantee you in Southern California, there's no Southern California Legends event that happens like this, particularly around women's soccer. And there's been a lot of great players that have come out of Southern California. I moved to Washington in 1994 as only the second ever head coach at the University of Washington. Dang Pibblevik came before me. Also a national team assistant, Region 4 head coach, someone who grew and developed a lot of players in this country. And so I've been very fortunate to be at the same place for 26 years and 26 seasons, and 24 of those alongside Amy. I've had a lot of questions tonight because this is my last season at UW, and the question that I keep getting is, well, what's next? What's next? And I'll answer it in this room, and then you guys can spread it to everyone else, and hopefully I won't hear it again. I don't know, and that's genuine. I genuinely don't know what I'm doing next. Come December, I'm going to move on to something else, and again, back to Lori, mine and Amy's financial advisor. I'm not retiring quite yet, but I feel like yeah, I think I've got a good decade or more in me to do something. Probably not in the collegiate game. I would probably say that's a certain, because I found my home at the University of Washington, and I feel like I have a good decade or so left to do something impactful and fun. Whether it's in the women's game, the men's game, the international game, I don't know. It might be something sort of peripheral to soccer, but I can tell you I have led a blessed life in this game, and this game has given me everything. And I hope Amy's little introduction didn't sound like I walk around complaining that I didn't make the national team. I don't. I played in 5 Olympic sports festivals. I coached in 1 Olympic sports festival. I played with all these wonderful women enough, more than most people got to. I trained against them. I got kicked by Michelle. I got to play with Michelle. I scored on Amy when she was on my team. It was, over 30 national championship, banger of a header. One of my best ones, yeah. So anyway, enough about me. I just wanted to say to this room that how special this is to be asked to be the moderator here, and to thank Debbie and Frank and the bartender in the tuxedo back there. Nubs. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our distinguished panelist. She's a native of Tacoma, State Youth Player of the Year in 1980, and played for Kozars and the national team from 1987 to 88. And probably the reputation as the meanest person ever to put on a national team jersey. And for anyone that ever played with her or against her, it's the truth, and she wore that badge proudly. Sandi, Gordan, Yotz. Yeah. You wanted her on your team. Are you gonna start talking, Sandi? Wait. Oh, I meant mean in a good way. All right. No, I'm gonna introduce you. You're gonna have plenty of time to get back at me, Sandi. More so than the summer in Minnesota when you cut my screen open and I got bit by mosquitoes all evening. All right. From Seattle, she was a national select team member in the days before the national team took the field, and a member of those great Seattle national club champs in the early 80s, and later coached at Bellevue College. Kerri Hunt. Kerri. Our next panelist was a rock for the Lowenbrow. There's a lot of teams that women played on that were beer sponsored. for the Lowenbrow Zurich's 1982 national championship, an 83 national team selection, and later the first American female to earn a USSF A coaching license. One of my favorite colleagues, one of the best coaches I've ever played with. I followed in her footsteps as the Region 4 ODP coach, and I can never, ever repay the debt of gratitude that I had a female role model to look up to. Like, stand up, Jan. Like Jan Smisek. Not just an outstanding player at UC Santa Barbara and with local senior amateur clubs such as Finnair Mavericks, she was the first woman to serve on the coaching staff of a men's U.S. pro club team, a national team member in 1992, and someone I also had the pleasure of playing with, and there wasn't a bicycle kick that she didn't love to try. Anyone that ever played with knows this about Gina Casella Segadelli. From Enumclaw, Washington, she represented and played for the Kozars, most notably the U.S. in their very first international match. She's also a fellow UC Berkeley, California Golden Bear. On the end, Kathy Ridgewell. This is 100% the first time ever I've seen an introduction of this person that is only one sentence long. I could go on and on and on and on, but you all know enough, and Google him if you need to. The coach of the 22-time AIAW and NC2A champion North Carolina Tar Heels, a 7-time National Coach of the Year, coach of the 91 World Cup champions, and inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame. Those are just a few things. His winning record is whatever it was, +1 Thursday. The legendary Anson Dorrance. Another member of the Kozars. She would be voted the nation's top collegiate player in 1989 and won 4 national championships at North Carolina, then spent 4 years starting for the national team, setting up both goals in the 91 World Cup final. Fellow USSF B coaching license candidate with Amy and Michelle and I. National Soccer Hall of Fame inductee, former coach at the University of Maryland and George Washington University. Had the pleasure of coaching against her in her last game at Maryland. A person that I have admired for years and years and years. The wonderful, lovely, just nicest person on earth and fun player to play with, Shannon Higgins Cirovski. Who is this Kozars team? She's another Kozar, an All-American at Central Florida. What happened? Someone's phone ringing? Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. She was the Adidas National Goalkeeper of the Year. She was a member of the 91 World Cup team. She was the head coach and started the program at the University of New Mexico. She was the first ever full-time, you're welcome, collegiate assistant coach at Santa Clara University after she got that guy's zit off his neck. She's been mistaken for Ellen DeGeneres, rightfully so, several times. Yeah. She one of the best people. She is also the head coach of the U.S. Deaf Women's National Team. She is always one to hide her light beneath a bushel. This woman does it all, every day, all the time. She's a people connector, a people person, a wonderful coach, a wonderful human being, my associate head coach, and my bestie that I've got to spend the last 30 years playing and coaching soccer with, Amy Allmann Griffin. All right, so we're rolling through the introductions. We also have some special guests with us tonight. While Michelle Akers couldn't be with us because, I don't know, she got lost between here and Georgia somewhere, I'm sure. She was just here a couple weeks ago, and it's a long flight. She had, she had to come over here and be famous and do her Michelle-type stuff. But she's with her son Cody in Georgia and rescuing horses, battening down the hatches, I'm sure, getting ready for some kind of natural disaster to happen that's just not Michelle being a natural disaster. But we do have with us this evening her stepsister, Shelly Saparovich. Where's Shell? Another one of my favorite outstanding center back pals, and her parents, Sue and Bob Akers. Also a member of the national team from 85 to 87 from Tacoma, Washington, Denise Boyer-Murdich. Denise, where are you? She's another one that needs to stand up. Oh, she is standing up. There, Boyer. Most of the time, it's attacking players I pick on. much like I did during the game, saying stupid things in their ear just to bother them. From Auburn, Kozars, and University of Puget Sound, a national teamer in 1985, Lori Boleyn. Hell of a player. Right here. She couldn't join us tonight, but I did want to make mention that she did want to come, but she had a prior engagement before this got on the docket, and she's at home right now. She'd asked me to try to tire out the Tar Heels. I think we did the best we could, but she's home right now toiling over how to slow Anson's team down tomorrow. Michelle French, the head coach at the University of Portland, wanted to be here tonight. From Shoreline, Washington, a team captain and All-American at the University of North Carolina, a member of the Kozars and 90 World Cup team, and the person that rightfully kept me off the national team most likely, my dear friend Lori Henry. And finally, we'd like to recognize a member of Mike Ryan's family. Mike served as the founding president of the State Women's Soccer Association. He coached the first University of Washington women's club program. After taking Seattle area teams to the first 3 national amateur championships, Mike was chosen as the first U.S. women's national team coach in 1983. Here tonight are his daughters, Maureen, Kathy Lee, Siobhan, and his son, Kevin Ryan. Welcome. Kevin and Mike also both, in a twist of fate, coached at mine and Amy's son's high school at Nathan Hale High School, Lori's alma mater. So I'm telling you, it is 1.5 degrees of separation, all of this. And the fact that Lori and Gina and Wynn's kids are all sitting up front just freaks me out in general. So the way the program's going to work is we've kind of divided it into 2 sections. So 4 panelists. I'm going to run through some questions. I don't want it to be extra formal, and these guys will have enough to say that we'll just kind of feed off what they have to say, and we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. And so we'll start with Kerri, Jan, Sandi, and Kathy. But first, I want to have Kevin say a few words before we let you guys settle in about your father and his appointment to that first national team, and just a little bit of a discussion about what that meant to him. Okay? Come on up. Kevin Ryan.
Thank you. First, thanks everybody for coming today. It's a great event, great turnout for this. I watched on the screen, they're showing some film clips. If any of you are local, you're familiar with the Dancing Bear. It was a special they did about my father and his coaching. And in that, he has a quote where he says one of his biggest dreams was to be the American world champion coach of the women's team. And his dream was realized when he was appointed to that position. It was unfortunate the first few years that there was no money available for them to actually play games or to do anything except just on paper. But he was so excited when they got the chance to go to Italy and actually play against an international competition. He was disappointed that they didn't have enough time to really prepare for those games. But towards that last game, he felt that was really starting to come together. And if they would have had another week to prepare before that tournament, that he felt that they could have won all those games. So yeah, he was very excited. It was a dream realized for him, and thank you all for coming out. One last little bit. He always said if he had one player from Washington on that team, they would have won every game no matter what. And that was Debbie Barlow.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, so the segue for this is to kind of go down to you guys down there, Jan and Kerri in particular. And again, this is when you love getting these questions. So, Title IX came about in the early 70s. Don't you just love it? Anyway, for the obvious reasons. So just if you guys can kind of talk about those early years when you began playing and just give people a little bit of background on soccer for you in those early years. Jan and Kerri, the microphone's right there. You can pass it around. You can talk about California. I'm the moderator, Jan. Ziggy coached here, so.
That's right. Our fellow Torrance.
You got to put your mouth, yeah.
Yes, I've done that before. Okay. Yes. So my neighborhood was mostly boys. There were tons of kids. Most of the girls played whatever the boys were playing. And it was usually touch football, 3 flies up, tag, army, whatever. And then one day, I think I was about 10 years old. Someone in the neighborhood decided to sign their son up for soccer. And then the games in the neighborhood changed to soccer. And that's how I started playing, in the neighborhood with the boys, just kicking around. And then when the boys had their teams and they went to their games on Saturday and the sisters had to go along to watch, we went behind the coach's back, untied the ball bag, and set up our own little kick around on the side. It's like, why would we watch? And fortunately, our parents were noticed to this and were proactive and said, hey, why don't the girls have teams? And that kind of set everything in motion. And thank goodness for those parents, because really they just saw that we loved it, and they wanted us to be happy, and it's like, why wouldn't girls do this? And they helped us throughout. That was, so moving into middle school, we got the league going. That was the AYSO. And then into high school. And I always felt like every game I played, I thought it was going to be my last game, because I was too old for whatever age group they thought needed to be the oldest. So then they add another one. And then I'd get to play again, but still with the same passion, because again, I thought it was going to be the last time. And then high school happened and went through that whole same process. College happened. I thought I was going to go try out for the men's team at UCSB, but nobody told me you had to show up for preseason training. So I signed up for the PE class, men's soccer. This was still segregated PE classes. Men's soccer, women's something, I don't know what it was. And the teacher of the class, his name was Zoltan von Somagi. And when he was going down the roll sheet, and he got to my name, and he said, Jan Smisek. And I said, here. And he looked up. It's like, you're a girl. Like, yeah. And he said, huh, you play soccer? Yes, I do. Are you good? Yes. Are you great? Yes. Can you hang with these guys? Totally. And he's like, okay. And there's more to that, but that's just, those were the early days, and kind of like where my passion for the sport came from, and the kind of being a pioneer and all that.
100% a pioneer every step of the way, Jan. All right. Kerri Hunt, I don't know this, but Kerri, where did you go? You grew up in Seattle, correct? You're a Seattleite, yes?
Yes, I am.
What neighborhood?
Shoreline.
Okay, Shoreline. Okay, a lot of great players from Shoreline. Yeah, look at him repping in the back, Henry.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, tell the Washington version of Jan's story.
I must be older than Jan. I didn't actually start playing soccer till I was 19. They didn't have soccer at my school. I wasn't aware of it. They didn't have. Are you ready for this?
Put the mic just a little bit closer.
Are you
Kerri.
ready for this? They didn't have basketball till I was a senior in high school. And so I spent my high school career running. And then one day when I was 19, I went to my little sister's soccer practice. And about 3 hours later, I just stopped and went, are you kidding me? I can run and chase a ball too? And I was smitten, and I started playing. And my first teammates were back there, Susie Saparovich. And she was my first hero on the field. And I want to talk later about Mike, but I didn't start playing until I was 19, so I don't have a lot of that kid background.
That's a great segue, Kathy, because I will ask you that. Talk about a little bit about that original. Leave it with Kerri just for a second, and then I'm going to get to Sandi and Kathy. Talk a little bit about that, those early days with Mike, and how that happened, that paper team, and how did you find out, and how did you get noticed? How did that all come about?
Well, good. Thank you, because I really want to talk about Mike. Well, Mike, my team with Susie, we went to play Mike's team, and we got beat. And I knew I wanted to be on that team. And
so this isn't a new thing. Kids wanted to play on the team that wins? Yeah.
something like that. And so Mike was unique. I call him the tough teddy bear. He was very tough on us, but he had a vision, and really my lessons as a player came from him. So I just want to touch on a couple real quick while I have the mic before I, try to follow Jan. He was tough on us, but we played, and we got better and better, and our team was so tough. Some of the people that aren't here, Denise Bender and Kathy McMahon and Patty Baird and Lorraine DeGroot and Sharon McMurtry. I'm getting there. I just, it's hard when you got to keep naming names. And they just played so hard, and they loved the game. And so for me, it was like going to a party with my friends. Every practice, you got to be with them. You loved what you were doing. You were playing hard. You were getting better. And after about a year of Mike being tough Mike, I stopped by his house one day, and I said, Mike, I don't know what to do. I'm trying as hard as I can. I'm just not good enough. I don't know what to do. And this is exactly what he said to me, Mike's family. He said, Kerri, it's my job to dream soccer that you don't even know about yet, that you can't even dream about yet. But I'm dreaming it for you and your teammates. And it's hard. We just have to keep working. And I stood there on the porch because I went there really mad, and I kind of went, okay, I'll see you tomorrow.
And that's what made you a great player.
Yeah, certainly was one of them.
Yeah.
Very much so. You asked about the early days. I worked hard, I watched hard, I tried hard, but what Mike taught us was not how to react, not how to anticipate, but how to create. And that was Mike's gift. He taught us that if our movement on and off the ball could create opportunities for ourselves and our opponents, and deny opportunities, or for our teammates, and deny opportunities to our opponents. And truly, I've worked with other people, and I've played with other people, and the lessons that Mike taught me are what really helped me as a coach as well. But Mike really helps us to create the game, and that's what helped us take us to that next level so that we could play the soccer that he was dreaming about for us.
That is so awesome to hear, and I bet so awesome for his family to hear. Yeah, it's really cool. It's not that they don't know it, but it's special, and you hear those things about Mike all the time. That group, like Kathy and 7 others were from Washington, made the first national team. Did you guys start to get the feeling that something special was happening here in the state? And just talk a little bit about that and what contributed to sort of, being outliers, if you will. I mean, there was like this pot. And you can pass it on to Kathy or Sandi. They can both talk about it. Go ahead, Kath.
Can you say that again?
Just like when other people from Washington started to make that first team or that paper team, and you had the chance to go to Italy on that first trip, how was it chosen, and kind of what did Mike impress upon the importance of it and representing your country and those types of things? Just talk about your experience.
Well, let's see. I don't even know where to start with that. I think
just hold the mic a little closer. That's a good place.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know where to start with that. I think when we started, there was so much happening at that time, maybe between 83 and 85 with firsts, right? There was the first youth national team, I think, on paper. I think Anson was part of that. Anson and Berhani and some of those guys were there. Mike was here with Kozars. Booth Gardner was helping us put that team together and brought in a lot of really good talent, brought in Mike.
For the young people in the room, Booth Gardner is actually a former governor of the state of Washington who is a big soccer proponent, and a lot of the players here, most people here in Washington of our era had contact with.
Right, exactly. And I think it was really momentum that was building at that time. And so it was really special to be in it, but I think at the time when you were in it, sort of like everybody was alluding to earlier, you're just out playing with your friends, having a great time. Like, we knew it was great. We knew it was special. Mike brought a lot to practices. We learned so much from him. When Berhani came and came up, Booth was doing a lot. He was governor at the time, so he couldn't come out. But he was doing a lot to bring in coaching talent, really, to help us go to the next level. And I think that when you sort of had all those things going on at the same time, it really created a really special environment for players to grow and get better.
Talk a little bit about the Italy trip. So first time representing our country in an international tournament. What was that like? And how did Mike to kind of describe that and impress upon you the importance of it?
I think, there's a little bit of realism that went into it. We had, I think, 3 days to prepare. I think is probably pretty accurate to go, and that's probably why Mike said if we had more time, we probably could have done a little better if we'd actually met each other and got to play together for a couple of minutes before we actually went. But it was such a whirlwind of we get to go. They got hand-me-down uniforms from the men's team really quickly. There were some moms that went with us on the trip, and they were quickly sewing the uniforms from extra larges down to smalls. And where's Boyer? Probably extra small, right? And the shorts were too big, and the shoes didn't fit right, but we were so excited to go, and I think Mike really helped us understand sort of the magnitude. And I don't know that there's any way to describe what it's like knowing you're the first one and walking out. If any of you in the room that have represented your country in another country, I'm not sure you can describe that feeling when your national anthem plays and you're standing there with 15, 18 other people from your country basically doing what you do and what you love to do, and it's overwhelming. And I think Mike was really good about helping us sort of bring along the magnitude of that event and let us know how really special it was.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I can only imagine. Sandi, you were coached by Mike and then called in by Anson. What'd you know about Anson and his style of play or his achievements, or what? Tell us a little bit about your path from here and being in that first group, and then kind of making your way and your pathway leading you to the full team at some point.
Well, I had the opportunity to play with Mike back in '83, and it was the first regional team that was picked to go to DC. And, back then, today we have, every city has a select team. Back in '83, we had one select team, and that was the state select team, and it's what everybody strived to be on. Mike coached that team and picked he picked the regional team to go to DC. And I had the privilege then of playing with Kerri and Jan in DC. And at that time, I was the young one. When I played with Anson in '87, I was the old one. So I remember Mike as being passionate about the game. He had come out to help our team, the Kozars, a few times. And I was kind of intimidated at the time in '83 when I was playing with you guys, because these were my role models. They played on Lowenbrow, and I think I was the only Kozar at that time that played on that team. The picture that I have shows that. So, it was a privilege, it was an honor, and I was scared. It was the first time that I'd ever done something like that away from home. Then I had the opportunity to play with Anson in '87, and I think Anson probably noticed me. I'm not sure how he noticed me. Probably from my years of playing. You laugh.
That she was really fast and breaking people in half. And the fact that Sandi said she was intimidated by someone just is terrifying to me alone, yeah.
But I had the opportunity of playing on the state select team again and going on to the sports festival, and that's the way it was done back then. There weren't, you had one tryout, maybe 2 weekends, you tried out for the team, and then you got called to try out for the national team. And Anson called me, and I was just tickled. I was thrilled. And I was still intimidated and scared.
Yeah.
Because back then, a lot of these players, like the April Heinrichses and stuff, it was still early in the soccer years where they didn't really have a name at that time. They really developed the name in 85, 86. And so I had played against these players, but never with them. And so,
and there weren't a lot of events for them. I mean, maybe Anson 2 a year in the beginning, maybe a camp and a trip, or 3 most?
Yeah, usually one event a year, but let me just clarify something for Sandi, just so she doesn't lose sleep over this. When I saw Sandi, you're right. She was fast as hell and mean as a snake. And it was
In a good way.
And it was clear she was going to be on my frigging team. That was.
I'm not sure if that was a compliment. Well, I think it was a compliment if
Yes,
I was on
it was
the
a
team.
compliment. Yes, it was.
No.
happy when Sandi was on our team.
And I do want to make mention, Sandi, as a woman of color, and to look around, there's actually, in this room right now, there's not a lot of color in here, to be honest, and I'm used to seeing a lot more at women's soccer events now. Did that have an impact on you growing up, and did you feel, I know the women of color on mine and Amy's team currently, it is something for them to look around and see other people that look like them and other female athletes that look like them or have backgrounds like them. And back then it was Kim Crabb, it was you, then Thori Staples, then Saskia. And again, the fact that I can name them says that there were a lot of pioneering women of color who were not amongst their peers necessarily. To talk a little bit about that. I think it's important.
Well, first of all, when I played on the team, I thought nothing more of my being a player on the team. And for me, I got a call from Amy maybe 3 years ago asking me what's my background because they're trying to figure out who the first
African-American
yes.
player was, yeah.
And I said, yeah. I said, I guess that would be me. I said, yeah, okay, I hold the record for something. It brings me great pride. And today, when I look at the national team, it's so diversified. I went to watch them play in France, and it's just really cool the way it's just developed for everybody. I mean, soccer's a game for everybody. It doesn't see a color or anything. But my dad would be very proud to know that his daughter has that title of being the first African American to hold the cap for the team.
As much a pioneer as Jan and Kerri, for sure. So kudos to you, Sandi.
Definitely, thank you.
Jan and Kerri, or anyone else that wants to jump in. This isn't on the sheet, but I want to hear from you guys about the soccer itself. How have you seen soccer? I mean, and again, I think there's been a lot of evolution, and I think it's actually, we were really lucky at a time where I feel like we played the game tactically in a pretty good way because of the influences and coaching that we had. And I think in this country, we kind of went away from that a little while, and I think it's coming back to it. But I want to sort of hear from you guys, looking back, and the older we get, the better we were, so make whatever up you want to. But what are your feelings looking at the game today, the women's game today, the national team, college games, the youth teams you coach, or your kids' teams that you see, and back then, the way the game was played? Are there big differences or evolution that you see?
Well, watching almost every minute, my husband's very patient when there's World Cup on. The speed of play and the strength of every player on the field is really exceptional. But I'm coaching and training kids, and I will sit down and watch a game with them, and I will say, that's the basic tactic that you need to be good at. So that was one of the things that Mike did, and sometimes, oh boy, did we get tired of doing the same drills over and over and over again. And sometimes it took us months to see how, oh, that drill really can be applied in a game. That was a great moment. But you have to do the basics very well, and then you also have to be, you have to be smart. It's 90% mental, and watching those kids this World Cup was just delicious to watch them play, and the quality of play. But you can point out those simple fundamentals that they're just doing at a very fast pace with the ball stuck to their foot.
That's great. Yeah. Go ahead, Jam.
Yeah, I definitely think that there are a lot more talented athletes the athleticism of the game has improved in addition to the tactical, the soccer intelligence, and the technical foundation. I think that for me, it's interesting coming from a situation where I couldn't get enough because there wasn't enough, to coaching now and having to force players to take time off, get away from the game, regenerate, come back, and really want it again. And there's a fine line between quality and quantity. So quality is really important. And yes, you have to get a certain amount of quantity in to master whatever it is that you're doing. But once you get to the point where you're just going through the motions or you're just surviving tournaments or practices and stuff, then it kind of takes away from the quality. So for me, that's a little kind of a dilemma with, but I think it's awesome that there's so much soccer.
And what about the idea of being able to see it? We have a women's pro team, we have the Sounders, we have the national team on TV, there's soccer on TV constantly. Do any of you feel like, and those that have kids or coach, all four of you, do you feel kids are getting better because they watch it more, or the ones that just play and don't watch aren't getting as better, as much, improving as much as the ones that do watch it?
I think more girls are watching, but they're not watching enough. And they're not watching. Yeah, a lot of the kids that I'm coaching right now, they were tuned into the Women's World Cup. But now that's over, so are they going to the rain games? Are they going to be going to UW, CLU, PLU, UPS, et cetera, those games? And actually watching, yes. Because...
Not say socializing with their friend.
Or spending...
Glad you can't see Finley's face, Win.
Exactly. Well, it's true. They're more about, the snack bar and, moving back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that too, yeah. And so, they maybe need the little homework sheets and sit still for a little while and actually track a player and say, okay, what does she do when she loses the ball? Does she hang her head? Does she take time out to, feel sorry for herself? Or does she get after it right away and make a difference with whatever she does next? And that's what watching the game, that's the intangible that you can only teach through observation and experience. It's like, I can't make a kid do that. And that, many times for players, is what is the difference between them and someone else that has similar talent.
Yeah, outstanding.
Hey, one other thing. The evolution of the game. I'm not sure how many people played on Syntrex and Dirt. Let's hear it for anybody that survived falling down one time.
Syntrex and Dirt. Fort Bend.
Just that in and of itself, changing the surface and allowing people to play on a consistent something that wasn't mud, wasn't going to scratch you up and send you to the doctor for the next 3 weeks or give you an infection, has changed the physicalness and the challenging part of soccer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good segue, Win. And I'm glad you guys chimed in, because the next thing we're going to do is the first four panelists. I'm going to open it up to two to three, 4 questions maybe for these four before we move on to the next group. Hi, Allie Galoob. But Allie Galoob is a U.S. Women's Deaf National Team player. Everyone wave to Allie. Yeah. Outstanding. She's one of the pioneers of that team, and she's also a World Cup champion. 1 time, 2 times? World Cup. Two-time World Cup champion. Yeah. And so I want to open it up to questions. Anyone have a question for these first 4 panelists? Raise your hand. Yeah, right here, up front.
Jan, I was wondering, when you were talking about when you were younger, what era was that? Was it before Title IX? Was it, because you kind of...
It was just before. Yeah, so my soccer discovery was probably 1970, 71. And Title IX was it 72?
72, yeah.
Yes.
And I'll chime in. Jan and I both grew up in the same area, the South Bay in Southern California, West Torrance and South Torrance. And so I was the beneficiary of AYSO, but I was also the beneficiary of players like Jan. And I would also say, being here in Seattle and a dearly, dearly departed friend of mine that I owe a coaching and playing debt of gratitude to is Siggy Schmidt. He and his family in the South Bay. Who wants to clap for Siggy? Yeah. Ziggy was someone, and I can say this because he was a dear, dear friend, loomed large in my life. And I would say that to his face. And his sons and his dad, Fritz, who is still alive, they brought soccer from Germany to Southern California, and they made sure they did not care if you were a girl or boy. It was for everyone. They were passionate about it. They made sure everyone could play. There was a whole group of players down there that were NASL players who became coaches because of Ziggy and his dad, who we were the beneficiaries of being able to play for. So, most girls, we had great men in our lives that helped promote us. I played for the same man from the time I was 13 till I was 19. When I became a coach, Ziggy was someone, when he was at UCLA and I was at San Diego State, would legitimately call me and say, hey, stick with it. And he would ask me about things on the women's side. And when he came to coach the Sounders to start our program here, nobody was more ecstatic than me that I had him in my backyard to ask questions. He would pop his head into our team room or our tent after games when we were down at UCLA or up here just to check in with me. So Jan and I really, compared to a lot of people in this country, a lot of women in this country, were lucky in the area we grew up in the 70s, period. I mean, we had the LA Aztecs with Cruyff and George Best, and a lot of those men ended up being coaches and people in and around our area that we benefited from. And I think it was very similar in Seattle and Portland with the NASL. And, Allmann is here today, and Jimmy Gabriel, and we're really, really lucky in that era. Any other questions for this group? Yeah, Denise.
One question. I just want to say something.
You?
Sorry.
Go on, Denise.
Okay. So I think we were really lucky in the Northwest region because when we started playing soccer, we took over our team and we went from Sounder Rights to Cozars. Larry Fear, bless his heart, became his manager. Booth asked if he could become our coach, and then he sat us down and he said, if we want to be good, we have to change. So he created this National Soccer Alliance, remember that?
Yep.
We played against the Tremors, IOX, we played against the best team out of Arizona. Every month we had a tournament and people flew to that city and we hosted the best teams to allow us to develop so that was why she was one of the greatest players and didn't make the team when she should have, because there's so many other people, and how many people from this whole region.
Yeah. And so the younger people in the audience understand when she's talking about this, a lot of this is post-college age. This isn't that you played on your state team when you were a youth player necessarily. This isn't when you played in college on a scholarship. Most of us were fortunate to be able to play in college, but it was more like what you did when you were 21, 22, and 23 when there was nowhere to go, and you don't peak as a female soccer player until at least 28, a lot of Anson's players lasted until they were, a lot of those first national team players didn't let people beat them out until they were well into their 30s. So we were adult amateur women, basically, playing on our state teams, playing on the Olympic Sports Festivals teams, and doing what we needed to do with great ambassadors like Larry Fear and Booth and others to try to help us just keep playing and figure it out. And I'll tell you what, the passion of everyone here was figuring out what you yourself needed to do to keep playing. Was it raise money? Was it work camp? And we'll get to those questions later, but this is post-college age. This is like people in their 20s.
I think that group should stand up.
Yeah.
Seriously, if you're in here and that
A lot of them up here, yeah. There's a lot of them. Yeah, stand up, Lori. Kelly, stand up, Kelly. I saved this sweat jacket for a reason. This was hard earned, this jacket. This thing has not lasted 40 years for nothing.
Kerri didn't stand up, but I think it was Kerri and Jan that asked me in 1984, hey Denise, you want to go to Washington, D.C.? We're doing this thing. And I never
I'm standing up now.
It's true.
What, play soccer?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know anything. It's like, sure, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll play soccer. After we played against, Anson and lost the national championship. But,
You and the rest of the world, it's okay. There's a lot. You're in very good company. Yeah.
So everything, working full time, doing all this stuff, playing soccer. How can I get another game? Playing college soccer, club soccer, Frank Barton's indoor soccer team, Coma Soccer Center, Walter Smetzer, senior, bless his heart, his thing, and then getting home at midnight doing my college stuff, and then,
A little bit of passion about it. Yeah.
Jan and Kerri and you holding the A license, and now it's your guys' job to create it at a different higher level so that there's more finesse, and you guys have been doing a great job.
Snap. Noted. All right. Any questions for these four? And we can ask more later, but let's get to the next four if there's no further questions. All right. Thanks, you guys, so much. Let's see. Who are these people again? Oh yeah, Anson. Did you know Mike? What did you know about Mike Ryan and that whole kind of beginning? Because you were in the game at that point with the men and women at Carolina, and you'd kind of gotten them going in the AIAW, and the NC2A stuff was just starting.
Yeah, what I knew was this: the best adult soccer in the country was played basically here. So that's what I knew, and I knew that their elite women's teams were the absolute best. And I was chatting with someone back there about why, because of course now the landscape has changed, because now Southern California is the soccer hotbed for the elite player. Not that you can't find a quality player in other parts of the country, but right now, if you get the cream of Southern California, that's the cream of the country. But back in the day, back in Mike's day, this was the cream, and it wasn't a youth level cream, it was senior players. And they were great. Someone mentioned Shannon McMurtry. That was the pre-Michelle Akers. I mean, this was a this was a statuesque, a player with extraordinary touch and technical quality and game intelligence. I mean, this was an elite player. So back then, I knew all about this, and I knew what was happening in this culture. A lot of the reasons, of course, were because of the NASL pros that decided to retire into the community and start coaching. And just like with Siggy Schmidt, they didn't have a bias towards one gender. They coached the community. And so Mike was a part of this extraordinary community. So I knew what he was doing with the teams here. And then, of course, back then, you're absolutely right. There was absolutely no money in our game, except there was Olympic money. So here was the Olympic money. The Olympic money was spent at the sports festival. So the theory back then was if you could be one of the top 18 players in each of the 4 regions, you would spend a week training in some location where they'd have a mock Olympics. And so there'd be 4 teams in it, fully paid for by the U.S. Olympic Committee, and you'd play basically as regions. Basically, Region 1, which is sort of New England, Region 2, which was the Midwest, Region 3, which was the South, and of course this is Region 4, and you'd all meet in one location. It was fantastic. Usually you'd stay in a college dorm, you'd be fed well, the quality of the fields were good, and you'd play sort of a round-robin event. So you'd play each of the other 3 regions. You'd have a 3-round event. And then the top 2 teams would play for the gold, and the following 2 teams would play for the bronze. And this was all paid for by the Olympic Committee. So that was the original design in picking the U.S. women's national team. So Mike Ryan's first national team that went to the Mundialito in Italy was selected at an Olympic Sports Festival. I was, I think, coaching the South team there or something, and Mike was the overall national coach, and we were all his acolytes, presenting him the players, presenting him a format, and from that format he picked the team that went to the first Mundialito, which I think maybe was in Jesolo, or I can't remember, but that was the first event. So he sat on top of us and picked the best players and took them on this trip. So that was the sort of origins, and it all comes down to there was no money out there, but the money we had was spent by the Olympic Committee on us at these events. And this was actually right after the paper teams, when you went to D.C., probably on your own dime, come to think of it, to play the other teams, and they would pick a paper team. The paper team was just honorary. I remember one of my favorite former players by the name of Susan Ellis was picked to that paper team, never had a chance to wear the jersey or get a cap for the U.S. full national team, but she was a part of those original paper teams. So back then, it was all, basically Olympic money, and the first efforts, you're right. I mean, those original teams, as Leslie knows and certainly Amy knows, because they go back to the beginning, is you wouldn't have a training camp. You would meet in the airport. We would decide a starting lineup, on the way to wherever we were going, Italy. We'd have maybe one practice suffering from jet lag, and then the next day you'd play a game, and so that's the way it went. And of course, back then it was really tough to beat anyone because, of course, we never trained. We didn't have the money. But the one thing we did have is we had players like Sandi, Gordan, and if some frigging Italian got through behind the back line, I was thinking, oh, God, save her, because Sandi was about to cut her in frigging half. And so what we had is we had a lot of extraordinary athletes that were very, very aggressive without a sophisticated training background, not because they couldn't play, but because we didn't have the money to really spend on their development. And let me share one thing because Denise is standing back there. First of all, the birth of the game at the highest level for women in the United States was born right here. It was born in Seattle. I understand that. And the thing I also love about your community is I play in an Old Goats event every summer. It's called the Adult Soccer Fest. And what do I see sprinkled among the best teams there? It's the core of the Washington legacy. And there, I always spend time on those sidelines watching, women like Denise continue to play, because she can still play, and I absolutely love it, because you guys are the original history of the women's game. You had people here that respected it. You had people here that coached it well, and you were women that were passionate about it, and so you guys are really the birthplace of the game. And that's why when I was asked to be here with you tonight, I didn't hesitate, because I want to pay tribute to your community, because you guys were the absolute beginning. And you had 4 kids on that first World Championship team. And I would spend money coming out here to recruit the Joni Dunlaps. Remember Joni? Yep. Another fast as lightning. It wasn't quite as mean as a snake as Sandi, but boy, she could fly. And so I knew where to get my talent, and I came right here. And I can't remember if Sandi blew me off for my scholarship offer, but I was blown off several times, chasing kids up in this community, because I knew this is where I should spend my money. And so I just want to let you know, as someone that's been involved in the game from the beginning, you guys are the original pioneers, and you guys are part of why we were so successful. And all of your leaders in this community and your commitment to the game, and people like Mike that understood the game and had a passion for it, you guys are the birthplace. And when anyone asks me, that's what I'm always going to say. So I'm here to basically thank this community. So thank you very much.
That's great, Anson. And for Shannon and Gina and Amy, all 3 who attended college out of state. And I've heard this story, and I think maybe Amy should go last because it's flowery. But you guys, Shannon played at the University of North Carolina and won 4 championships. Gina went to Santa Barbara. Amy was at the University of Central Florida with Michelle. They were bitter rivals here in state. So they all have 3 different pathways, different stories before their national team careers kind of sprang. Talk a little bit, each of you, just about what it would have meant to have Division I college programs here, like if that would have been a team. And then raise your hand here if you played on the club team here in Washington. Bonnie Broughton, yeah, a lot of you guys played club soccer here in Washington collegiately, correct? Yeah, not collegiately. Who played collegiate club soccer at UW? Yep. There's
Western had it before.
Western had club.
And
They were a varsity Division II team.
we were an
NAIA to begin with. So there were no D1 teams. They were either club or they were NAIA. But the amount of talent in this state that wasn't able to kind of put a team together to compete with, I think in '82, my first year at Cal, there were 17 Division I women's soccer teams in the country. And there are now 333 Division I teams, just so you know. So Shannon and Gina, we can start with you. You guys talk a little bit about that, like what that would have been like, or going away from home and trying to find an opportunity outside of here.
Yeah, I'm going first because my situation was a little bit different, but I'm actually one of those who did blow off Anson. Unfortunately, I do regret it. But at the time, the only schools that offered scholarships were on the East Coast. So we didn't have much of a choice. And I was, I'm not sure everybody else's financial situation, but I was definitely a poor white kid who needed a scholarship to go to school. And so initially I was looking at all East Coast schools, but I was very much a West Coast girl. and really wanted to stay in the West Coast. And so ultimately what happened is, you heard Burhani's name mentioned earlier. Burhani was helping me quite a bit in looking at some schools, and I really wanted to stay on the West Coast. And so I ended up at UC Santa Barbara, and what happened was I got an athletic grant, which was really just money they had taken from the men's program and gave to me to play soccer there. And unfortunately, I blew my knee out my freshman year. We were ranked 5th in the nation, actually, that year. And about 2/3 of the way through the season, I blew my knee out, which didn't ultimately end my career. It ended my college career, but later in life, I had an opportunity, just playing with these women, had an opportunity to play at a regional tournament or something with the women's state team. And that's when I got my chance to play with Anson, and he came over and said, hey, you want to come play with us this summer? And it was like, sure, why not? I actually was playing without an ACL at that time, ligament, which was a little bit debilitating, but but it was still the opportunity of a lifetime, and a lot of fun. So, but at the time, yeah, it was hard because there were no schools on the West Coast that offered soccer scholarships for women.
So just so people have a little reference, Gina, Shannon, and Amy, why don't you say where you went to high school and what year you graduated from high school here?
Mariner High School at Everett. All right, Marauders. Actually, one of the scholarship winners, too, Lisa Ricuro.
Oh, cool.
Who got the scholarship is from Mariner. So she and I became fast friends after I found that out, and I've been helping her out a little bit.
Mariner High School.
I graduated in 1984.
84. Okay, Shannon?
Shannon's a little younger.
Mount Rainier High School, 1986.
86, Mount Rainier. Amy?
Decatur High School in Federal Way, 1984.
84, okay. So a little bit about your college journey, Shannon.
Well, there weren't a lot of colleges that were offering. I mean, the only schools that I remember even looking at were Colorado College, Stanford, who one of our and I didn't really look there. I wasn't smart enough to go there. UC Berkeley, and at the time we had, obviously Lesle was down there. They were not offering scholarships, or in fact, when they traveled out to us in my freshman year, I remember them telling that they paid for their trip out there, out to North Carolina. So, and basically that was it beyond, Anson calling me, and trying to track us down and get us to go west. But Lori Henry, first of all, ended up going to North Carolina, and she was one of my state team teammates, and so that helped.
Yeah, great. What about you, Amy?
I must have missed the memo, Anson. My college search ended up, I wanted to go a place where I knew that they put some time and energy into goalkeeper training. My first year as a goalkeeper was my junior year in high school, so I had a lot to learn. I really wanted to go to Cal, and I wrote that really great letter that everyone was to write. Hi, my name is Amy Allmann, and I was the captain of my team in 3rd grade, and I got the response back that said, I don't think you have what it takes to play Division I soccer. And the best part of that story is, 6 years later, that very same letter got sent back to me with a Post-it note on it. It was the same coach that Lesle played for at Cal, Bill Merrill. And he said, it was a little post that said, Bill Merrill's recruiting blunder. Good luck in the World Cup. Yeah. So I grew up here, and I was a kid, and Florida sounded sunny, and it was far away from
Marianne Allmann.
No, and actually I knew that they did goalkeeper training on a daily basis, so I ended up walking on. I was a walk-on there. And kind of a funny story, I'll try to keep it quick. He didn't really remember that I had chosen to walk on there, so no one asked me to play in goal. So for the first 2 weeks, I was just running around as a field player, like trying to stay on the team. And Michelle was on my team, and she would come home from practice and go, oh my God, these guys are so good. I'm going to get cut. I am going to get cut. She was a full ride, right? And I'm like, oh my God, if you're getting cut, I am gone. Like, do not say that, do not say that, do not say that. And finally, a goalkeeper finally got hurt, thank God. And that was when it kind of clicked to our coach. Coach Rudy, it kind of clicked. He goes, God dang it, I swear there was another kid that said she was going to play in goal. And I'm like, I think that's me. Like, meanwhile, I'd lost 15 pounds and had heat stroke, like from running around the field. But that's how I chose to go.
Just really quick, Emily. Full circle and ironic and all of that, but now coaching at the University of Washington for 24 years. Talk about being a high schooler and meeting with then athletic director Mike Lude at the University of Washington. Who was there? Anyone else?
Lori, were you there?
Yeah, Frank Gallo was there.
I got fired by him.
Yeah, okay. Carry on.
Bonnie, were you there?
Yeah, Bonnie was there.
A few of the really solid players in Washington State went like a couple years before you're graduating and just met with the athletic director and said, what are the chances that there would be a varsity sport, women's soccer, here at the University of Washington within the next 4 to 6 years? We weren't even like, we were saying, I'll play for a year of my career. Seems, and he literally said, and there was like a reporter, he said, as long as I am AD at this university, there'll be no women's soccer. Wow. And at the time, we were all embarrassed because it was just a kind of embarrassing moment. And I didn't think anything of it, but my blood slowly boils harder and harder and harder the more I think of how many different ways you could tell a bunch of young women, we're not looking at it right now. We have all these other sports to add. It's a great idea. Let me look into it. So I have come full circle because I've lived a pretty great career at the University of Washington. So suck it, Mike Lude.
Okay, so I'm actually going to add on to that because I ended up in the women's game entirely by accident. I was basically, I had no ambitions to coach. My father was starting his own oil company, and he wanted me to be his corporate attorney, so I felt duty-bound to go to law school. I loved my father, and I was a dutiful son, so I went to law school for him. And while I was in law school, I was trying to figure out a way to contribute towards my education. My wife had a good job in Chapel Hill, and I was basically my college coach. Walked up to the athletic director and basically said, I'm retiring. And he was a physical education instructor at UNC, and a part-time soccer coach. And he went in and literally told my athletic director to hire me to succeed him as the head men's coach at the University of North Carolina. I had absolutely no interest in coaching, but he went in there. And then my AD called me in, and I thought he was going to ask my opinion on a list of people that were certainly chasing the position. I had no soccer resume. I had coached recreational, co-educational soccer in the Rainbow Soccer League in Chapel Hill. That was my coaching resume. So I go from that to the top of Division I. So all of a sudden, I'm now a law student. I'm coaching the men at North Carolina. And I was so young, I was coaching guys I'd played with. That's why no one ever called me coach. It was always Anson. So you couldn't have some guy you finished playing with, all of a sudden turn around and call you coach. So everyone's always called me Anson. And all of a sudden I'm finishing my law degree, and I took a course shy each semester to get the degree. It was taking me into my 4th year. And the AD calls me up again. He says, Anson, are you free later this afternoon? I said, yes, Mr. Kobe, I am. And he says, well, I want you to come and look at this women's club soccer team that has applied for varsity status at the University of North Carolina. I'm thinking, sure, I'll give you my opinion on this team. So I go out there with him, and he basically asked me a couple of questions. He says, well, what do you think of the team? I said, well, they're well organized. I think the coach has done a really good job, because now, of course, shilling for him to hire this guy that's done all the work, to put this team forward as a varsity for the women at UNC. And this was obviously post-Title IX, but I think there was a subtle pressure, and I think this guy was reading the tea leaves that he had to sort of get in Title IX compliance as soon as possible. And then he asked me at the end of this review of this game, we both watched together, if I make your position full-time, will you also coach the women? And I said, sure. So basically, I went from a part-time men's soccer coach and law student to a full-time men and women's soccer coach as I was finishing my law degree. And I coached men and women together for 10 years, but honestly, it was a completely different attitude, because my athletic director, wanted to endorse a women's club team. We were the first women's varsity in the South. We had no one to play against. We played high school girls select teams. The teams that used to beat us on a regular basis was a team from McLean, Virginia, called the McLean Grasshoppers. So here, the University of North Carolina versus the McLean Grasshoppers, and they're beating us to death. And then, of course, what we would do when we would play these elite youth teams is after they would beat us to death, I would take note of every girl that ripped us to shreds and then, of course, offer her a scholarship. So what ended up happening is we just fell into it just because some excellent leader back then had the vision to decide, you know what, let's treat these women properly. And I think a lot of these people get underrepresented and underappreciated because it was his decision. He didn't have to. We were the first in the South, and he did it. Again, no ambitions of coaching, certainly no ambitions of coaching women. And just because of this visionary man put me in a position where there's a great line in broadcast news, and I use it, anytime I start talking about my life. There's a line in there where the sportscaster gets promoted from a sportscaster in Ohio to the news desk in New York, and he's on the phone with his father, and he says, "Dad, what do you do when your life exceeds your dreams?" And that's exactly what's happened to me. My life has exceeded my dreams, because I never dreamed of this. And holy cow, just like chatting with Leslie and Amy, in this her final year as the head coach, and she had a wonderful tribute for me before her game, which I really enjoyed. And then I told her, then I spent the rest of the game scared to death because they're about to beat us to death. So I went from on top of a mountain because of her tribute to holy crap, we're going to get beaten out here. And it was just,
Kill them with kindness.
So anyway, for me, it's been an extraordinary dream, and I again attribute to just these great people that put us in a position to do something extraordinary. So I just wanted to put that cap and tribute on top of someone that rejected an opportunity here for at UW.
Yeah, and as Anson, that's awesome. I mean, it really is it in a nutshell for a lot of people. And Anson talks about his time in law school and visionaries, and Shannon made mention of Cal and the program there. We didn't have scholarships. Amy made mention of Bill Merrill writing her the rejection letter and then sending it back to her later saying, oops. He was my mentor and he was my college coach, but he was also an attorney. And when I graduated from Cal, I was kept on as an assistant coach, but I was also in law school. And so here's Anson, who I knew had gone to law school. Here's Bill, who's a lawyer. And I'm like, wait, I think being a lawyer has to be a really crappy job because I know neither of them are being paid that much. They most hate it. So after 1 year, much to my parents' chagrin, and Bill Merrill had warned me about this. He's like, it's not that you can't do law school. You'll like school, but you will hate being a lawyer. So I became a college soccer coach, and that's all I've done for the last 34 years is be a Division I college coach. That's all. But I do owe it to the visionaries that supported our sport, supported our passion, and made me someone who wanted to give back. So it was a really similar path, to be honest. And I got to be at my alma mater for a solid 5-6 years before I went on to San Diego State and then to Washington. And there's something special about it, about being in the game for that long. Shannon, Gina, Amy, I want to talk a little bit about the game again. Shannon in particular, I'm back home. You guys are in China in '91 after I was one of two fans, me and Bob Akers. I think we're the only two people in Haiti for the qualifying. Who else was in Haiti for the qualifying in November of 1990? Me and you, Bob. Bob was politely turning down offers of buying gum to all the people that were coming up to the bus. Everyone else turned their head, but I swear to God, Bob Akers spoke to every one of them. No, thank you. No, thank you. But it was me, Bob Akers, and maybe Robbie Stahl and a couple of other people. But so we went to the qualifiers in Haiti, and then they were in China in November of '91. And I don't remember how we saw it on TV, but there was some way you could find it somewhere. It was really blurry and hard. But anyway, Shannon, talk about the lead up to the World Cup and your experience, someone who had a huge impact in that tournament, and just what you remember most about it.
I'll start with just the Haitian CONCACAF qualifications. We were, obviously, we mentioned the fact that we were in Haiti. It was absolutely, it was amazing to be there. But we were dealing with absolutely no electricity during most days. You couldn't flush your toilet for most of the day. You couldn't take a shower. You had no idea when you'd be able to take a shower. We were training on literally, some of the crappiest surfaces you've ever seen. And we went to we went through the qualifications. I don't think we got scored on the entire time. There, go on. I don't think we got scored on the entire time. And the Haitians really fell in love with our style of play, and we beat a really tough Canadian team in the final and leading up to that final game. I actually have stitches right here. I have 10 from the final game against Canada. So we went on to win that, and obviously our preparation between that and the World Cup wasn't a lot because we weren't doing a lot at the time.
Do you remember, Shannon? I think this is right, if I recollect. Between qualifying and the World Cup, did you have an injury?
Yeah.
So this is kind of for the kids in the audience too, because Shannon was literally one of the most outstanding players I ever got to play with, and I didn't get to play with her that much, but watching her, probably one of the tactically smartest players of our era. For not that she was slow, but she was a real quick thinker, Shannon. Yeah. But she was a mastermind of the midfield, and growing up, Amy used to tell stories, because I had just met her and got to play with her in the sports fest, and she said, I'm telling you, we go to practice, and she tells the coach what to do. Shannon was a general and a coach on the field, and so I do remember, I think the B team, we played you guys in Santa Barbara, but there was something between qualifying and the World Cup that was hard on you, Shannon, and I think everyone looks, oh, she's on the World Cup. Everyone hits an obstacle, and I remember that being a tough year for you, and being really, really happy how much you contributed in the World Cup final.
Yeah, in Santa Barbara was one of our last tournaments or last camps before we ended up going to the World Cup. I actually got diagnosed with a fifth metatarsal stress fracture. It's very common in soccer players, and just from cutting a great deal. And so my training leading up to the World Cup was kind of staying off that foot. I actually played with one turf shoe on my left foot and one cleat on my right foot in the World Cup. Because I was having hard. When I would cut, I would get what I called a zinger, and I couldn't cut. So to be able to play all 90 minutes or 80 minutes, I guess it was at that time, of a World Cup in all those games was pretty tremendous.
And Gina, I think you and I were both on that team in Santa Barbara right before. You want to talk about that a little bit? I mean, even if it's a little bittersweet. Remember, I wasn't even in the talk, so at least
actually
maybe
it was really fun. Without giving too much personal information, it was the first time my father had ever seen me play soccer, and I remember going up for a cross, a header. I was a forward, and I don't know, Lori, if it was you. I don't think it was you, but it was somebody else that I went up for the header, and they grabbed the back of my jersey and literally ripped it all the way off. And there I was. I got the header. I didn't get the goal, but I came down and I had to be taken off the field to put a new jersey on because it completely ripped off me. And I thought, well, there you go, Dad. There's my, this is why I play soccer. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, actually.
Talk about your path a little bit, Amy and China, and even if it's just, anything about fried pig faces or goalkeeping, either one.
Well, I am one of the only ones that did not play second in the World Cup. And it was awesome. So right before then, Kim Maslin and I were the two keepers that had kind of been in and out. We kind of alternated games. So we were both responsible for qualifying, both responsible for winning and losing the games that we did up until the World Cup. And then right before then, Mary Harvey came onto the scene, literally right before maybe the last training camp. And she had been playing in the Bundesliga, and she was a little bit taller and a lot more aggressive than I was. And it was tough because I got on the plane thinking I was going to get some playing time, and I got off the plane not playing at all. And I had a choice to make. And my choice was, what is my end game here? What do I want more than anything? And what I want more than anything is to win a World Cup. So I pretty much had to look at Mary Harvey, who actually was the keeper at the time at Cal, which is why I wasn't good enough to go to Cal, right? And just said, what do you need? What do you need? And I do think it's a great story for kids because I have a really, really good perspective in a lot of things about how my parents reacted and about how I reacted. But the first couple days, I felt like my heart I was swallowing it. And I could tell the reaction of my teammates. They were kind of in pain for me because I'm a team player, right? I've always been all in. So I didn't want to see that. I hated that look. I hated that look. So I first had to fake it a little bit as to how happy I was. But then I was like, holy crap, I am at a World Cup. and I'm on the team, and let's do this, right? So my dad, this is for parents out there, because I had both perspectives. I'd come off the field, and my dad would say, "Oh my gosh, Joy," because I didn't play. Joy, I am so proud of you. You played amazing. You were awesome. And I felt so happy for Joy. And it made me, I was relieved. I was like, my dad's so proud of me for being here. And he's so happy for my friends. That's why I'm happy. I literally had no issues from that point on. He's like, "Oh my God, good for you." He might have said something like, "I'm having so much more fun with you not in there because I'm scared shitless when you're in there." Like, honestly, being a goalkeeper is rough. Being a goalkeeper is hard. Being the parent of a goalkeeper, way worse. Way worse. So now that I'm a parent, I kind of get what they're going through. My mom, on the other hand, she wanted to come tonight to give Anson a piece of her mind.
We told her the wrong date just for you, Anson.
I mean, it's crazy.
We scheduled a tennis match for Amy's son.
I mean, to the point. So Anson, I don't know why you picked me. I am 5'4". I've never. We're sitting here. I'm like, I don't even know why, but thank God he did. Every opportunity I've had has been because of this guy. Like so many of being here, being invited here, being on a panel, like being a sportscaster, being whatever. And so I always knew I was dodging a bullet because I am 5'4", right? And my mom, we have to run fitness. If you didn't play, you had to run fitness right at the end of the game. So the stadium lights are going off, and we had to stay fit in case we were called upon, right? In case we were called upon. So my mother, I just found this out like not long ago. So embarrassing. I'm still friends with Joy. And so Joy's parents told the story, but I'm on the line. We're ready to run. Henry's on one of those lines every now and then, and we're ready to run. And my mother says to Joy Fawcett, Joy Beefeld's mom, "I stayed and watched your kid run. You're going to stay and watch mine."
God's honest truth.
I could have been miserable and felt sorry for myself, or I mean, the best connections I have now are all of those people because I was all in. I cannot stand it when people feel sorry for themselves because they didn't play, because I feel like the ring I have and the friends I have, I don't feel like I didn't play. I really don't. I felt like I was in it. So that's my story. And now I'm standing up and you asked me to just talk briefly, but that's my story. Thank you.
So just a couple more things, and then we'll open it up to questions. But you know, the landscape of women's soccer today, it's no secret. We just won the World Cup, and a lot of us, raise your hand if you went to France. I swear I saw all of Northeast Seattle in France. Yeah. So we got to go to France this summer, was in Canada in 2015, was in Germany. Amy and I are notorious for renting an RV and doing a blog and driving our family around the World Cup, being fans, and it's awesome. But there's no secret that our women's national team's also suing our federation currently, and that they've been fighting for equal pay, and we're fortunate enough to have the bravery of our own Portland pilot and Reign FC player Megan Rapinoe in our hometown to speak up, and many other players. But so I guess, you know, for Anson or anyone that wants to speak to it, you know, at the back in the day, you know, USSF and being able to have, you know, they were going to run a World Cup, so we're a first world country. We needed to send a team to China. But Anson, talk a little bit about the federation, and you know, one of the questions that was on my thing to ask, someone else wrote it, but was about, so what were you guys compensated back for the World Cup? I scratched it because I know what you were compensated for playing at the World Cup. Nothing really. But anyway, so talk a little bit about then till now and why we're still fighting so hard.
Well, actually, we've always been at war with U.S. soccer, even going back in the day. In fact, one of my early battles with them was we were in China on one of our tours, and Michelle went up for, I guess, a punt or a goal kick. And with no one near her, she headed it and collapsed. And she was sent to a Chinese neurosurgeon. And our doctor that was there was just terrified because obviously couldn't speak the language, didn't trust any of the doctors that were looking at her. And anyone that is involved in any sort of litigation, this is a very serious concern that U.S. Soccer had. And so what they wanted to do is they basically didn't want Michelle on the team anymore. So what was their route to make this happen? Well, they ordered me to cut Michelle. And I said, no. I'm not going to cut Michelle. I said, you can fire me, but I'm not going to cut, one of the most extraordinary players I've ever coached. I mean, you can fire me and do what you want with the next coach and say, well, okay, we're going to hire you, and then you have to cut Michelle if you want to avoid this. But I refuse to cut Michelle. And going back to something as early as that, we've always been at war with them. You talked about Booth Gardner. We tried to set up a women's pro league before the first women's pro league. Who was our first commissioner? It was Booth Gardner. And he contributed $100,000 of his own money to start this league. He was going to be our commissioner. And so what did U.S. Soccer do to make sure we didn't have a women's pro league? Well, they scheduled the U.S. women's national team in the first 4 weekends of our league. And of course, those were the people that people were going to pay money to come watch. So they closed the league down. So I've been at war with U.S. Soccer from the beginning. I'm barely out of, the battleground with them. And of course, the women are now at war with them. So here's what I absolutely love about Rapinoe. There's been a paradigm shift. And Rapinoe's been the social justice warrior for us that's been an incredible role model. And I just love the way she's changing the landscape. Because what she said, it was something to this extent. Go gays. You can't win a world championship without. You can't win a championship without gays on your roster, and that's science for you. And she's in a. And here's what's absolutely fabulous about that. So she didn't come from this dark corner and attack people with her social justice position. She did it in a way that demonstrated her confidence, also demonstrated the fact that she understands what a delicate issue this is. And here's the other thing that was fascinating. One of the best articles written during that World Cup was written by a French team in Paris that had mixed emotions, rooting for the French against the United States. And let me share the reason why. They had mixed emotions because, yes, they were French soccer players, but here's what they knew. They knew the platform that the United States was providing for their liberation in a deeper and more important cause than women's soccer was on the line if the U.S. could win and have the megaphone. Because here's what's interesting about the French culture. None of their players have the courage to come out. And so that none of them had a platform. So here they were, sitting in a bar watching their team play and deciding that it was better if the United States won. And so if you look at it from this very important perspective for us, what she demonstrated is the value of athletics. First of all, and we fight this all the time in the ivory tower about, well, do you really have any value as a sports team on an academic campus? And you know what we do? Because here's what it does, especially for women, is it gives them a platform to develop an extraordinary confidence. It gives them an idea of what combat is really like and not to back down from it. And then to have the courage stand up, to stand up like Rapinoe and demonstrate what sports has done for her, and then become a real social justice warrior in changing the culture. And I think there's been a paradigm shift. So for me, this World Championship checks all kinds of boxes for me, but the main one it checks for me is the empowerment of women. And the business, and I was talking to Lesle about this the other day, and then I saw Yael Rabush at our game following, and I was chatting with her about this. There's been a wonderful change. And the change honestly comes from the fact that these women play a sport that's combative. There's physical risk. They've developed a certain amount of confidence, and they're helping change the world through it. So even though, we talk about maybe that, a lot of us are doing this for fun, there's a deeper value in this. And I see it basically every single day. And I see it, when I watch former players of mine, like Lori Henry, who's a principal here locally, or Shannon Higgins, who's running teams on her own. And I see them basically changing the environment that they're a part of. So for me, I love this side of what we're involved in. And the war's not over. And of course, our women are still fighting it. And obviously, I know that everyone in this room is behind it. But please know, I am so proud to be a part of this very positive revolution. Again, the genesis was way back in the day. You guys were the driving force. So I'm here again to pay tribute. And also to let Lesle know, who, by the way, was the president of the NSCAA, now the United Soccer Coaches, took leadership positions early. And I feel very proud to be a part of a collection of women. And by the way, Amy underestimates her value as a goalkeeper.
Light beneath the bushel.
Yes. She can touch the crossbar. She was on that team for a reason, and also obviously you can tell her incredible value for chemistry. And then I'm not a very social creature, and so right after we won the World Cup, I just went to my room, closed the door, and locked it because I knew what was going on down below, and the last thing I wanted to do was to go wherever the hell these players were. And so they are very smart. They probably had a debate on which girl to send up to my room to get me to come down for the party, and they picked the right one. I have never been able to say no to Joy, so they sent the sweetest woman I've ever coached up to my room just to beg me to come down to help them celebrate. And so, yes, so I went down, and then Amy read her poem. She's the poet laureate of the women's national team. It was a beautiful poem. And while we're speaking of poems, one of my favorite moments in that World Cup was Shannon Higgins' mom wrote a poem to the team to inspire the team. And I read the poem and I said, you know what? I'm not going to tell anyone in the room who wrote this poem. And it's one of the greatest poems. I think Grant Wall or someone produced something recently about it with, I think it was televised or something. Or maybe a podcast. It was a podcast. And he had me reread the poem like I was in the pregame before that World Championship, because I wanted every woman in the room to think that her mother wrote it. And I found out later, most of them knew that their freaking mother would never write this kind of thing. But it was Shannon's
It certainly
mom.
wasn't Amy's mom.
But anyway, just to make a long story short, everyone contributed in all kinds of ways, and I don't want, Amy to self-deprecate herself to death. She was on that team for a reason. She was an extraordinary goalkeeper, but even more than that, she was an extraordinary human being, as you could tell from her story. And it was framed by two poems, one by Shannon's mom and the other one by Amy's. And so please know that that lives in my heart forever.
Awesome. Yeah. Those are awesome stories. And mentioning Joy Biefeld-Fawcett, and the world goes, round and round. Amy is Joy had, as everyone knows, she was like the original soccer mom on the national team, and kind of paved the way for motherhood and high-level soccer to take place. And her oldest daughter, Katie, came and played for Amy and I at the University of Washington. She's now about to graduate from graduate school, so if you want to start feeling older and older. But I mentioned Joy because Joy is also Amy's volunteer assistant. They both volunteer and is her co-coach with the Deaf Women's National Team. And how lucky are those women to have them? Yeah. Talk about giving back and changing lives. So we'll try to make this a little bit brief because we have a couple other things to do. But I want to open it up for a couple of questions. Does anyone have questions for these guys? This group, this part of the panel. I think you've heard some pretty cool inside scoop stories this evening. Come on, bravery. Yes, Alan Hinton, the man. Has anyone ever watched the movie The Damn United?
Anson?
There he is, live.
I followed your career for many years. I think I met you many years ago. And you've won so many trophies, I understand you have to keep moving houses to accommodate the trophies. Is that right? You have to keep getting a bigger house to put your trophies in.
They just built him a big old house on campus in their new stadium that's been long in coming and deserved, so now he's got a place to keep them, yeah.
So, where's this money thing going to end? I mean, you're clearly, in your opening remarks, and I've really enjoyed all your remarks, but you've talked about money about 20 times. What's the answer to the money problem?
Yeah, what we're trying to do, and obviously Seattle does a good job with this, Portland does an extraordinary job. What we have to figure out a way to do is we've solved the excellence on the field conundrum. So the American women can play at an extraordinary level, but what all of us have to do, and it gets back to a comment that was made earlier over here on my right, we have to support the game. And here's the way you support the game. And he knew what my answer was going to be because his involvement in professional soccer all of his life, he understands the bottom line. The bottom line is this. We've got to pay to watch our women play, which means we've got to sell out every stadium. And if you're near a college campus, you've got to make sure every one of their games is sold out because we have to have a game changer. The game changer for the women is to watch and pay for the game live, but also to watch it when it's televised. So the television stations out there start to basically pay the Women's Pro League to basically televise their matches. And that's the next step for us. So what we need is leadership within all the communities to basically support the women in the most aggressive way with your wallets by paying to watch these women play professionally. If there's a national team game within a 2-hour drive of you, drive to watch them play, pay for the tickets, etc. Because the only way they are going to be paid equally is if they start to generate a similar level of income. And even though, yes, for the last, let's say, 4 years, the women have made more money. And I think at a minimum, what has to happen is they have to have the same basic per diem that the men get. And right now, we're not there yet. But ultimately, for them to get equal pay, we've got to start to pay to watch them play. And if we start to do that, then the minimum salary in the NWSL, which is right now $16,500, that is starvation wages. The only way we change that is if we start to sell out larger stadiums and support these women. And then all of a sudden it's beyond equal pay. And that was a softball question. I appreciate you allowing me to address it, but that's where all of us have to go.
But I checked the crowds. When I first came here, I watched the Cowboys, and they were great. And I've watched women's soccer ever since I've been in this town, and I've been here 40 years now. And I've watched the growth and the quality of play, and I compliment Lesle and Amy, particularly for your services to the University of Washington. And the crowds are going up. I checked the crowds. 48,000 for the women's team last week. You know very well, England will play France, England will play the US, and you'll get even bigger crowds. Because the England were pissed off about it, by about that much. But that's wonderful for the game. And Rapinoe, who I've met, she's doing wonderful for the game. And she'll be doing wonderful for herself, by the way, as well. Isn't she getting $3 million to write a book? Will she share that out with the team?
That's a question for Megan Rapinoe.
So, congratulations on your career. Keep going. The fire's still burning, I can tell. And I'm going to go now, but this was a marvelous night. So thank you for coming.
The legendary Alan Hinton, folks.
Alan.
Yeah, Gina, go ahead.
Alan, before you leave, because I didn't get a chance to do this at your events, and I told you that I really was disappointed I didn't get an opportunity to do this. But for those of you that don't know, Alan Hinton took me to breakfast. It was, 1994, early 1994, right? And Bernie James, and asked me if I would be an assistant coach with the men's Seattle Sounders soccer team. And, who would have thought in 1994 that an Englishman would want a woman on his staff? So clearly a man before his time. He was one of the first to really advocate for women's soccer in Washington State. I was honored to coach with him for 2 years. I learned a ton, especially in terms of the fact that you could use the F word as an adjective, an adverb, a verb, a noun, however you needed it. And some of the most fun memories I have, and just wanted to make sure you got that acknowledgement, because clearly that was, I think, an extraordinary move. It's not like I applied for the job. They asked me to come and be a part of that, and it was just so much fun to be a part of that. The first 2 years that the Seattle.
You got paid a lot of money too, didn't you?
Yep, a little bit. But the inaugural years for getting the men's pro team back in Seattle, and it was just great to be a part of that. So thank you.
And thanks for coming tonight, Alan. Cheers. All right, one more question. Anyone got a doozy of a question? Anyone? Okay. This is a stall tactic to let you think for half a second. And I'm going to start with you, Amy, because, I always put you on the spot. And I'm used to you being angry at me. So she just said, what? Just in 1 or 2 words, what soccer's been to you? In 1 or 2 words. Reggie, you're last, so you get the longest amount to think. And you went to Cal. Do us proud. Come on now. What's that? If anyone has it. Yeah, but Amy, if you have yours already. Gina, you ready to go? Yeah, here we go. A or 1 or 2 words on what soccer means to you.
Love.
Oh, nice one. You can say money and Alan will leave. Anson. It can be 2, it can be 1, it can be 3. It can be a phrase.
Well, it gets back to that story of the broadcast news. I mean, I live a life beyond my dreams. It's just extraordinary, and it's still going on. I'm almost 70, and I just signed another 5-year contract with UNC, another 10-year contract with Nike. So I could be dying on the job.
I think it's no matter when or how I met or meet a person, soccer's involved. It's the connection, and it becomes family and friends, and it's forever.
Family, friends
matter.
forever. I like that one, Jan.
I want to thank you guys for using more words. You opened the door there. Thanks.
Uh-oh.
No, a great adventure.
They're going to turn the lights out, so I'll just say
no,
that.
a great adventure. Taught me some of the greatest lessons of my life. Had some of the greatest relationships and friends, and got to travel many places in the world. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's in my heart. So if you love the game, you never know where it will take you.
Awesome.
And for me, soccer's been just, at this point in my life, many wonderful memories and great friendships. I've lost touch with a lot of you guys, and, I'm looking forward to reconnecting. So.
Cool. Thanks, Sandy.
I think for me, it's watching sort of how the U.S. can mentor and inspire other nations around the world to help lift up their women as well. I think our women are doing a great job of that right now, and I think that's going to be the future.
Global empowerment.
Yep.
I like it.
Oh, and world peace.
Yeah. Did she say world peace or world peas? Higgs?
I'd say it's just been part of bringing passion into my life more than anything else. I mean, I made a career of it. I married a soccer coach. I had kids that played, and it's basically been the passion that's fed my family forever.
I'm clearly the only one that's a rule follower here.
Clearly.
I can't put it into words, but I wish you knew the pre-soccer me that was afraid of her own shadow and afraid to take risks and didn't have many friends and went to a special school because she was shy. And I always looked at a lot of other people and wished I was her and her and him and her. And I always think comparison is the thief of joy. And I don't compare anymore. Soccer has made me me, and I think that's the best way I can sum it up.
Awesome. And let's have a big round of applause for our panelists. And stand up. Kathy Ridgewell. Sandi, Gordan, Yotz, Kerri Hunt, Jan Smisek, Anson Dorrance, Shannon, Higgins, Cirovski, Gina, Casella, Segadelli, and Amy, Allmann, Griffin.